Savannah woke in whispers. The early light filtered through the oaks, brushing across moss-covered fences and onto the pale stone of 122 Whitmore Lane, a mansion set back from the street like it was hiding. Massive wraparound porches, shuttered windows, and that piano in the parlor no one touched anymore. The house stood still, proud and private, like the man who owned it. Grant Whitmore didn't rise with the sun. He rose with the silence. He moved through his home as if it were made of glass. Every hallway held a memory he didn't speak aloud. He passed the west parlor without looking in, though the room seemed to wait for him. The piano, once the heartbeat of the house, remained under its cover, untouched for 8 years. Ever since the fire. Ever since the headline. Ever since everything beautiful had felt like a risk. He stood at the window in his study, sipping black coffee. Outside, the grounds crew was raking leaves into perfect piles. Inside, the air didn't move. His sister Mira had told him once, "You don't live here, Grant. You haunt it." But she hadn't visited in months. He glanced at the antique clock. 4:53 a.m. 7 minutes. At precisely 5 o'clock a.m. Every Tuesday and Thursday, the new night janitor arrived. She didn't knock. She had a key from the Preservation Society that managed the estate's upkeep. Grant never saw her come or go. He only knew she left the scent of lemon oil in the West Hall and didn't rearrange a single book in the library. He liked that. By 5:07, Elena Rivera had slipped into the foyer. Quiet shoes, canvas tote. Dark braid tucked under a wool cap. She didn't look at the paintings or linger in the music room like the others had. She moved with purpose, as if she didn't want to be noticed. Which was why he noticed her. Today, she started in the parlor. She pulled back the curtains slowly, letting sunlight roll across the floor. She moved to the piano, wiping the keys even though no one played them. And then it happened. She sang. Soft, low, barely above a hum. Just enough that the sound drifted down the hallway like a question. He froze at his desk. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't polished, but it was raw, haunting, and so real it made his coffee taste cold. He stood slowly and walked toward the sound. She sang something in Spanish, a lullaby maybe, something aching and familiar in its quiet resolve. She didn't know he was there. She didn't know anyone was. And Grant, stone-faced, silver-templed Grant, stood just inside the frame of the hallway, watching a stranger awaken something he'd buried. She moved to dust the frame above the mantel, still humming, and then she turned. Their eyes met. She gasped. The rag slipped from her hand. Her voice broke off mid-note. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't know anyone was here. I didn't mean to—" "You're not paid to sing," Grant said, voice like the floorboards, polished, firm, unforgiving. "I know, I'm sorry. I'll stop. Please don't report me." He studied her, dark eyes, tired but proud. He saw something there he hadn't seen in years. "You're new," he said finally. "Yes, sir." "Just started this month." He looked at the open piano. "You'll learn." She nodded, clutching her tote like it might save her. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing beside the keys, breath unsteady. By the time she finished her shift, the house had swallowed the moment. Everything looked the same. Curtains drawn. Piano closed. Silence intact. But something had shifted. The next Tuesday, when she arrived, the parlor lights were already on, and the piano was open. A single sticky note sat above middle C. 2 words. Sing again. She stared at it for a long time. Was this a trap? A test? Some eccentric billionaire's joke? But the air in the room held something different today. An invitation. A question waiting for an answer. She looked around. No one in sight. So she sat down and sang. Only 1 verse. 1 minute, a piece of a song her grandmother used to hum when folding laundry late at night. She left without a sound. He didn't mention it. Neither did she. But Thursday, the piano was open again. And this time, the sticky note read, "Please." She sang a little longer. What started as a curiosity became a ritual. Tuesdays and Thursdays. 1 song, 1 soul shared in secret. She never knew he was listening, and he never spoke. But sometimes, as she sang, she felt it. A shift in the air, like the house itself was listening. Then one morning, 3 weeks later, she turned mid-verse and caught him leaning against the doorframe. She froze. "I didn't hear you," she whispered. I didn't want to interrupt. She rose to her feet, awkward. "I know I'm not supposed to." "I didn't say that," he replied, stepping into the room. "Your voice. It's honest." She blinked. "No one's called me honest in a long time." "What's your name?" Elena Rivera." He nodded. "Why are you cleaning houses at 5 a.m. when you should be singing on a stage?" She hesitated. Then, "Because stages don't pay the light bill." For a second, he didn't move. Then he smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't practiced. It was real. That night, Elena went home to her grandmother's apartment with music in her chest and confusion in her bones. She barely spoke during dinner. Rosie was already asleep. Luce raised an eyebrow, handed her a bowl of soup and said, "If something's on your heart, sing it out. Don't let it rot." But Elena didn't sing that night. She couldn't, because someone had finally seen her, and that was more terrifying than being invisible. Back at Whitmore House, Grant poured himself a second glass of wine he wouldn't drink. In the parlor, the piano was still open, but for the first time in years it didn't feel like a relic. It felt like hope. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The rain began before sunrise, light as breath, painting the streets of Savannah in soft silver. Grant stood at the bay window of his study, watching it blur the magnolia trees outside. He hadn't slept. Not really. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard her voice again. Elena Rivera. He said her name aloud for the first time, like testing a melody before playing it in front of someone else. A week had passed since the last song. Since the smile. Since the question that hung in the silence afterward. "Why are you cleaning houses at 5 a.m.? Her answer hadn't left him. Because stages don't pay the light bill. It echoed in his chest, sharper than he wanted to admit. She hadn't asked for pity. She hadn't asked for anything at all. And that's what made it sit with him longer than most things did. He poured coffee and left it untouched. By 4:58 a.m., he'd moved to the west parlor. The piano was already open. Elena almost didn't come. She sat in her grandmother's kitchen for a full 10 minutes longer than usual, staring at her folded uniform. Rosie had woken up once during the night from a bad dream and curled up in her lap without a word. She never asked for her mother anymore. She never asked why Elena worked 2 jobs, or why she kept a folded eviction notice in the back of her planner. Kids like Rosie knew too much already. When Eleanor finally walked into the Whitmore estate, her steps felt heavier than usual. She wasn't here to sing. Not today. She had bills in her pocket and exhaustion stitched into her coat. Today, she needed the check, not the piano. But when she turned into the parlor, the sight stopped her breath. The piano was uncovered. A hot mug of tea sat on the side table, steam rising in gentle spirals. And beside it, a note. Your voice doesn't belong in the shadows. Neither do you. Okay. She touched the paper with the tips of her fingers. She wasn't sure if she was flattered or frightened. Good morning, came a voice from behind her. She startled slightly, then turned. Grant Whitmore stood in the doorway, no suit today, just a dark sweater, barefoot on the hardwood. He looked human, tired, maybe, but human. I didn't expect, she started. You did, he said gently. You just didn't want to. She offered a smile that didn't quite settle. Thank you for the tea. I didn't know your preference, but Mira said you drink jasmine. Your sister? She helped with the pantry when I moved back in. Mira's kind. She's insufferable. Eleanor laughed softly. The tension thinned just enough to breathe. Grant walked toward the windows. You know, he said, this house has stood here since 1893. It survived hurricanes, termites, and 2 failed marriages. But it hasn't heard music since my wife died. The air changed. I'm sorry, Elena said, quiet again. I used to think silence was control, he continued, but now I think it's grief, just dressed in stone. She looked at the piano, then back at him. And what changed your mind? He met her eyes. You did. Eleanor swallowed hard. There were moments in life that felt like cliff edges. And this was one. She could walk away, keep this job, stay safe. Or she could sing again and let herself be seen. So she sat. The first notes were shaky, but familiar. Her voice filled the room like water rising in a quiet basin. This time, Grant didn't stay at the window. He moved to the armchair, listening with his eyes closed, like he needed it. When the song ended, he opened them slowly. I thought I hated this piano, he said. Turns out, I just hated the silence. Elena stood. This still isn't part of my job description. Then I'll write a new one. She tilted her head, amused. You're not easy to read, Mr. Whitmore. Then read the room, he replied, and for a moment his smile made her forget how tired she was. She didn't leave early, but she didn't linger either. As she gathered her things, Mira appeared in the hall, arms crossed, watching quietly. She's good, Mira said. She's real, Grant replied. And that scares you. I'm not sure it should. Doesn't matter. It does. Mira stepped closer. Be careful, not with her, with you. The next morning, Eleanor woke to find a small envelope slid under her door. No return address. Inside was a check, not from the Preservation Society. From Grant Whitmore personally. Double her usual pay. A note attached read, Time has value. So does art. If you're going to give both, I intend to pay for both. G. She folded the note and didn't tell anyone. On Thursday, the air felt different. As Eleanor entered the house, she noticed something new. The west hallway had fresh flowers. The parlor was dusted already. And Grant was waiting. I'd like to show you something, he said. She hesitated. You don't have to. I want to. He led her through a side door she hadn't noticed before. Down a narrow hall, past a room lined with drafting tables and blueprints. "This is where I work," he said. The space was full of sketches, some framed, some torn and redrawn. Elena looked at one, a concert hall, acoustics shaped like waves. Another, a community center with skylights and gardens. "These aren't just buildings," she murmured. "No, they're spaces that ask questions." "What kind of questions? What would it look like if someone believed in you?" She turned. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't posturing. He was asking her. And suddenly, her heart did something she hadn't expected. It hoped. But before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A message from her supervisor. "Due to press inquiries, your assignment at Whitmore has been paused. Further updates pending." Her breath caught. Someone's asking questions. Grant frowned. "Who?" "I don't know, but I can't afford to lose this job." "You won't," he said firmly. Elena held his gaze. "You don't know that. I know I won't let it happen." But something had already shifted. The air was colder now. And outside, for the first time in weeks, the piano was silent. The afternoon sun filtered through the live oaks, casting fractured light across the tile floor of the Whitmore solarium. It was too quiet. The kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful, just paused. Grant stared at his untouched coffee. His phone rested on the table beside it, screen dark. No updates, no answers. The email had come that morning from the Preservation Society. Effective immediately, external janitorial services are under review. Please refrain from further communication until reassessment is complete. They didn't mention Elena by name, but he knew. Something, or someone, had made her disappear from his house like a note cut short mid-song. And the worst part, she hadn't called. Not once. Grant leaned back in the chair, watching shadows slide across the floor as clouds passed overhead. A week ago, she'd filled this space with music. Now it felt like an empty lobby, all sound stripped out. The door creaked behind him. "Mira, you heard?" she asked. He didn't look up. They pulled her. Mira crossed the room and set a worn manila envelope on the table. "You're not going to like what's inside." Grant opened it. A tabloid. Glossy, cheap, and cruel. The hidden note, "Mystery woman, linked to Grant Whitmore's estate." Beneath the headline, a grainy photo of Elena's back as she entered the estate gates before dawn. Below it, a shot from the garden, her seated at the piano. Not smiling, just focused, like it meant something. His jaw clenched. "Who leaked this?" "Does it matter?" Mira asked. "It's out. It matters if someone inside that house betrayed us." Mira sighed. "It's a mansion, Grant. You think word doesn't get around when a young woman starts singing to a ghost in a suit?" Grant stood, paced toward the window. "She didn't ask for this." "No," Mira said gently. "But she's got it now." He turned, something raw in his eyes. "This was mine. Our moment." And someone turned it into a headline. The words hung there, heavy and irreversible. Grant looked back at the photo. Elena's posture. The curve of her neck, the way her hands hovered above the keys. She looked real. Honest. Exactly the way she had that morning when he called her voice truth. And now she was gone. Mira sat down across from him. "So what are you going to do?" Grant didn't answer, because he didn't know. Elena sat at the kitchen table, phone off, face buried in her hands. The letter from the Preservation Society was still fresh on the counter. Not fired. Not officially, just paused. Luz moved quietly in the background, washing dishes that didn't need it. The air between them was too still, like everyone was waiting for someone else to speak first. Rosie sat at the far end of the table coloring, humming a song Eleanor had once sung half asleep on a bus ride home. She didn't know anything was wrong. Not yet. Finally, Luz broke the silence. "Why haven't you called him?" Elena didn't move. "Because I don't know what I'd say." Luz dried her hands on a dish towel. "Try the truth. It's cheaper than guessing." Elena looked up, eyes tired. "He's not the kind of man who lets his world spin out of orbit. If I've already been let go, maybe that was my answer. You think he's the one who pushed you out?" "I don't know what to think." Luz leaned against the counter. "When your mother left, I used to sit by the phone every night, waiting for it to ring. Waiting for answers I thought I deserved. But sometimes silence isn't rejection. Sometimes it's confusion." Elena blinked back, the heat rising behind her eyes. "And sometimes," Luz added, "men like him don't know what to do when something finally feels real." Elena nodded slowly, but her heart still ached. 3 days later, Eleanor received a knock at the door. It wasn't Grant. It was Evan Marley. She hadn't seen him in almost a year, not since he'd covered the local music festival and casually dropped her name in the credits. He stood now in his tan corduroy jacket, camera bag slung across his chest, notepad in hand. "You're hard to track down," he said. "I wasn't trying to be found." "I'm not here to cause trouble," Evan said, glancing down the hallway. "Can I come in?" "No." He nodded. "Fair." Eleanor stepped outside, closing the door behind her. The wind carried jasmine from the neighbor's garden. Evan pulled out his phone. "I need to ask, did you know about the photos?" She stiffened. "What photos?" He hesitated, then held up the tabloid. "You haven't seen this?" She snatched it, eyes scanning the cover, her breath catching. She could barely remember the day they'd taken it. The idea that someone had followed her, captured her like that, made her stomach twist. "I didn't know," she said, voice barely there. "I believe you," Evan said. "Look, this story's going to grow. Someone's already feeding the press, but if you talk to me, I can steer it." "Steer it?" "Control the narrative. Before someone else turns you into a scandal, you're not." She shook her head. "I'm not a story." He looked at her gently. "You are, whether you like it or not." Grant stood in the west parlor, hands buried in his pockets. The piano was closed again, not by choice, but it felt like a coffin now. The echo of her voice lived in the walls, but the sound had nowhere to land. No message, no word, just an empty room and a woman-shaped ache he couldn't name. Noah entered without knocking. "I heard about the leak," he said. "I'm handling it. You should know. Board members are starting to murmur. They're asking if this woman is a distraction." Grant turned slowly. "She has a name. I'm just telling you what I hear." "Well, hear this," Grant said. "I built this company. From nothing. I put roofs over people's heads before most of them knew what drywall was. And now one photo could undo it all." Grant's voice went quiet. "I didn't ask for her voice. But it found me." Noah studied him. "Then do something, before they turn her into a punchline." That night, Eleanor sat on the fire escape, knees pulled to her chest. She watched the street below, wondering how many people had seen that photo, wondering if Grant had even fought for her, wondering if she'd ever step foot in that house again, without shame chasing her through the halls. The phone rang. Her breath caught. She let it ring twice. Then 3 more times. And then silence. She didn't answer. Because she didn't know if it would break her to hear his voice. Inside, Rosie slept soundly, and on Elena's lap sat a blank page of sheet music. Empty, waiting just like her. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Rain had returned to Savannah, a slow, steady curtain, soaking the brick streets and blurring porch lights into golden halos. Elena sat on the city bus just after 5 a.m., pressed against the cold window, her reflection broken by each passing drop. She wasn't headed to the Whitmore estate. She was on her way to the historical archives downtown, her second job. Quiet work in a back room with faded maps and brittle ledgers that didn't whisper her name or ask her to sing. She hadn't heard from Grant since the missed call. Hadn't called back. The weight of not knowing felt heavier than anything concrete. The tabloid had disappeared from newsstands. But not from her mind. Not from his world. The silence between them had grown thick. And it hurt. At the archives, she filed boxes no one touched, and listened to a playlist through one earbud. Every song reminded her of something she didn't want to feel. At noon, her supervisor, Kendra, called her into the office. "You've got a visitor," Kendra said. "He says he's here for research, but I've seen that suit before." Elena's heart dropped. She stepped into the small front gallery where sunlight hit dusty display cases. Grant was standing there. His suit was navy, pressed. His presence calm, but his eyes told another story. They didn't settle. They searched. "I didn't think you'd come," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure if I'd be welcome." "You're not welcome," she replied. "But I don't know what this is anymore." He nodded slowly, absorbing that like a punch to the ribs. "I didn't leak anything, Elena. I didn't know until the article was printed. I believe you. I tried calling. I know." A beat of quiet. Outside, a truck rolled by, tires hissing against the wet street. He stepped closer. "When I heard what they did to your contract, pulling you without notice, it made me want to burn the whole system down." Her jaw clenched. "You don't have to rescue me. I'm not here to rescue you." "Then why are you here?" "Because I miss the sound of your voice in my house," he said. Something cracked inside her. She looked down, trying to keep it together. "You've built entire cities, Grant. You don't need my voice." He took a breath, hands in his pockets, like they didn't know what else to do. "I've built a lot of things," he said, "but none of them made me feel human the way that one verse from you did." Elena looked at him, eyes glassy. "Then why didn't you come sooner?" "I didn't know how." The truth settled in the air between them like a sigh. She gestured to the empty reading room. "You want to sit?" He nodded. They sat across from each other at a long oak table that smelled like thyme. Neither spoke for a while. Finally she asked, "Why me?" Grant looked at her directly. "Because you didn't need anything from me. Because you were kind when you didn't have to be. Because you sang to a house that hadn't felt alive in years." She shook her head, laughing bitterly. "And now I'm a headline." He leaned forward. "Not to me." Her eyes flicked up. "So what now? Are you here to make this all disappear? Offer me a payout? Try to buy the silence back?" "No," he said softly. "I came to ask if you'd come back." Elena froze. Not as a cleaner, he added. As a curator. She blinked. What? I want to open the house. The public rooms. I want people to see the history in it. Its music, its pain, its beauty. You said once that stages don't pay rent. I want to give you a stage, one where you get to decide what the music means. Eleanor didn't know what to say. You'd be in charge, he added. Exhibits, events, community concerts if you want. It would be yours to build. Her voice caught. Why would you give that to me? Because I trust you with it. She looked away. And what happens when the board finds out? When more photos surface, when people start asking why an estate curator sings lullabies at dawn. Let them ask, he said. You're not afraid? He hesitated. I'm terrified. That, more than anything, felt real. She nodded slowly. I'll think about it. He stood to leave. But just before he stepped away, he said, The piano's still open, every morning, just in case. Later that night, Eleanor sat on the fire escape again, wrapped in her grandmother's shawl. Rosie was asleep inside, a book tucked under one arm. Luce was on the phone with an old friend in another room, laughing in a way that made the apartment feel less small. Elena pulled the manila envelope from her bag, the one Evan had left her with. Inside was a folder, not photos, not gossip. Records, the name printed across the top. Natalie Rivera, her sister. The last known address, a rehab center in Atlanta. Intake date, 9 months ago. Discharged, not listed. Evan had written one line in red ink across the last page. I thought you should know, just in case she reaches out first. Elena stared at the page. Her throat felt tight. She hadn't spoken to Natalie in over a year. Hadn't even dared hope. But the weight of those pages in her lap made her feel like someone had just whispered a storm was coming. She tucked it away. Not now, not tonight. She reached for the sheet music on the windowsill instead. Her fingers hovered over the notes, and quietly, just above a whisper, she sang a verse. Then another. The street below was empty, the sky clearing. And 3 blocks away, Grant Whitmore stood in his parlor beside the open piano, listening, eyes closed. And for the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel silent. It felt like it was waiting. The air inside the Whitmore estate felt different, charged, like it had exhaled after holding its breath too long. Morning light spilled through the high windows of the west parlor, catching the motes of dust that floated like slow-falling confetti. The piano stood open, waiting. Elena stepped inside quietly, like she was afraid to wake something. Grant had given her the key himself, not through an assistant. Not with ceremony, just his hand, brushing hers as he said, "Come when it feels right." It felt right now. She let her fingers glide over the ivory keys without pressing them. Her breath rose and fell in time with nothing, and yet everything. This room had once felt like a museum. Now it felt like a heartbeat. She took a seat on the bench and opened the folder she'd brought. Sheet music. Her own. Handwritten. Half songs. Fragments of things she'd never finished because life had interrupted. Rent notices. Phone calls. A niece who needed a parent when no one else showed up. She flipped to a blank page. She started writing again. Behind her, the floor creaked softly. She turned to see Mira standing in the doorway, arms folded, eyebrows raised. "You're early," Mira said. "I couldn't sleep." "Neither could he," Mira replied, nodding toward the hallway behind her. "You should know. He's actually nervous." Elena tilted her head. "About what?" "About you being here. about asking for more than he's allowed himself to want in years. Elena smiled faintly, unsure what to do with that. Mira stepped into the room, her heels quiet against the floor. When my brother lost his wife, the man who came back from that funeral wasn't the same one I grew up with. He stopped drawing for a while, stopped laughing. Then one day, he just stopped trying. Until now, Elena asked softly. Until you. Elena looked down at her notes. I'm not trying to fix him. I know, Mira said. That's probably why it's working. Upstairs, Grant stood in front of the tall mirror in his dressing room, adjusting a cuff that didn't need adjusting. Noah leaned against the doorway behind him, arms crossed, wearing a tailored grey jacket and a skeptical expression. You're opening the house to the public? Only the main level, west and south wings. Just twice a month. And she's curating this? Grant nodded. Elena has taste, vision. She understands the weight of memory. Noah's brow furrowed. And what about the board? They don't need to approve internal events until someone turns them into an external scandal. Grant turned to face him. There is no scandal. There's always a scandal if someone wants it bad enough. Grant stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. This isn't a fling, Noah. This isn't distraction. It's the first thing I've cared about in years. Noah held his gaze. Then you'd better be ready to protect it. I am. The silence that followed said more than words. Noah nodded once, then added, If anyone asks, I wasn't here. That afternoon, Eleanor walked the garden path with Rosie. The little girl skipped 2 steps ahead, gathering fallen petals into her hoodie pocket, determined to make something called flower soup when they got home. Elena couldn't stop watching her. Rosie had been smiling more lately, laughing again. Sleeping through the night. Maybe it was the change in air. Maybe it was that Elena had started humming again in the kitchen. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because Rosie had seen her aunt choose something that wasn't survival for once. What kind of flowers are these? Rosie asked, holding up a handful of purple blossoms. Lavender, Eleanor replied. They smell sweet. Like pancakes, Rosie said, and Elena laughed. They rounded the corner toward the front of the estate, when Elena noticed something strange. A car was parked at the far gate. Black, sleek, tinted windows. And unmoving. Elena paused, instincts prickling. Come on, baby, she said gently, ushering Rosie toward the side entrance. Inside, she found Grant in the study, reading over blueprints. The room smelled like old cedar and fresh ink. There was a car out front, she said. He looked up. Describe it. She did. His jaw tightened. Press? She asked. Maybe. Or maybe someone trying to be subtle about watching. You think it's about the story? I think it's not over. She stepped closer, trying to keep her voice steady. Is this going to keep happening? I don't know. And if it does? She asked. If my name keeps getting dragged into your world? He looked at her then, not with apology, but with clarity. Then we face it together. Eleanor didn't answer. She didn't need to, because her hand had already found his. Later that evening, Mira sat alone in the music room, flipping through an old leather-bound book of sheet music. She hadn't played in years, but tonight she pressed her fingers to the keys, slowly, gently, and let them find a familiar progression, Chopin. Her daughter had loved Chopin. Mira's eyes filled, but she didn't stop playing. Upstairs, Eleanor stood at the window of her guest room, watching the sky slip into dusk. The city felt quieter here, but not empty. There was something sacred in the way the light curled through the trees. She pulled out her phone, opened a new voice memo, and sang. Not a song for work. Not for anyone else. Just for herself. Soft. Steady. Brave. In the hallway, Grant paused outside her door. He didn't knock. He just listened. And when the final note faded into silence, he closed his eyes and whispered something no one else heard. Stay. The morning sun cut through the clouds like a promise, gold and soft, against the gray of the past week. Whitmore House breathed differently now, less like a museum, more like a home stretching awake. The piano had been played. Laughter had returned, quiet but real. Music drifted down the halls in fragments. But for Elena, peace never arrived without a shadow following behind it. She stood in the east hallway, pinning her new exhibit plan to a corkboard. Grant had given her full creative control. Mira had even unearthed old journals from the house's earliest owner to use in the opening display. It was the kind of project Elena could get lost in, the kind she'd dreamed of when the world still felt wide. But her fingers shook as she pushed the last pin into the board, because the folder sat waiting in her bag, Natalie's file. Still unopened since the night she'd found it, a storm contained in paper. Elena? She turned to find Grant leaning against the doorway, sleeves rolled up, a hint of sawdust on his shirt. He'd been working in the garden shed all morning, rebuilding a bench Rosie had broken with a running leap and too much joy. "Thought I'd find you here," he said. "I'm always here now," she replied, smiling faintly. He stepped into the room, looked at the sketches, the pinned pages. "You're building something," he said. "Feels different than when I build, Mine starts from a blueprint. Yours starts from breath." She didn't answer. Grant noticed. He studied her for a moment. "You've been quieter. I've had a lot in my head. Anything I should worry about?" She paused. Her instinct was to say no's, to smile it away. But then she looked at him, really looked, at the way he stood with just enough space to let her move closer or not, the way his eyes never rushed her. So she reached into her bag and handed him the folder. He opened it slowly, read the name. Natalie Rivera. "My sister." He looked up. "She disappeared 2 years ago, left Rosie with me and never looked back. I thought she might have been dead. But that file says she's not." He read the dates. "A rehab facility. Atlanta, 9 months ago. Evan found it. He sent it to me in case she shows up." Grant closed the folder gently. "And what are you afraid of?" Elena folded her arms. "That she'll come back and take Rosie. That everything I've built with her will be ripped away like it never belonged to me in the first place." Grant walked to her, careful, slow. "Eleanor, what you've built with Rosie, it's not temporary. It's not pretend. She's yours. She's not legally. If Natalie wants her back, she'll have to get through a lot more than paperwork." Elena's throat tightened. He reached for her hand, held it gently. "I'll help you," he said. "Whatever comes. Whatever it takes." She looked at him then, and something broke through. Not fear, not sadness. Relief. "Thank you," she whispered. They stood there for a moment longer, wordless. Then Rosie's voice echoed down the hall. "Eleanor, Mr. Grant, come see what I made." They followed her voice to the parlor. She stood by the fireplace, arms out, presenting a sheet of crayon-colored paper like it was her masterpiece. "It's our house," she declared proudly. The drawing was messy, vibrant. The house was big, windows wide. There was a tree with hearts instead of leaves, and 3 stick figures in front. 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small. "That's me," she said, pointing to the small one. "That's Auntie." "And that's you, Mr. Grant." Grant knelt beside her. "You gave me hair." She nodded solemnly. "Good hair," Elena laughed. Rosie beamed. "I made it because this is the first house that sings." Grant looked up at Elena. Their eyes met. And suddenly, that wordless ache in his chest, one he hadn't been able to name since the day his wife died, quieted. Not gone, but quiet. Later that evening, Elena sat on the back porch with Mira. The cicadas had started their summer chorus early, and the sky was streaked with watercolor light. Mira poured 2 glasses of iced tea and handed one to Elena. "I like watching you here," Mira said. "You fit." Elena stared into the yard, where Rosie ran barefoot through the grass. "Some days I still feel like a guest. You're not. Maybe not to you. To him either." Elena sipped her tea. "I think he wants something more." Mira didn't flinch. "Do you?" Elena didn't answer at first. "I want peace. I want a place where music isn't just background noise, where Rosie can grow up and feel like the world isn't going to fall out from under her." Mira looked over the rim of her glass. "And Grant? I want him to want those same things, but not because I walked into his house humming. I want him to know it's real." "Then ask." Elena shook her head. "What if I don't like the answer?" "Then at least you know. Better than building a life on maybe." Inside, the lights flickered on one by one. Grant stood in the kitchen, quietly setting out 3 plates for dinner. He didn't look over his shoulder, but he knew she was watching him. He smiled. Elena took a slow breath, set her glass down, and stood. "I'm tired of maybe," she said. Mira smiled, soft and proud. "Then go find out." Savannah cooled as twilight folded over the sky in gentle blues and warm pinks, casting long shadows across Whitmore House. The cicadas had quieted. The air was thick with summer stillness, the kind that made the world feel paused between heartbeats. Elena stood just outside the kitchen, leaning against the doorframe, watching Grant move with quiet precision as he set the last fork down beside a cloth napkin. Everything about him tonight was careful, thoughtful, almost nervous. She stepped forward. "You set a table like you've done this 1,000 times, she said. "I've had a lot of quiet dinners," he replied, without turning. "But I think this might be the first one that matters." Her heart flickered at that. Rosie bounded in, arms outstretched, a tiara askew on her head and bare feet slapping the tile. "Can I sit next to both of you?" Grant crouched beside her. "We'll form a triangle of greatness." Rosie gasped. "Like superheroes." Elena laughed, but her chest tightened. Because this wasn't pretend. This was warmth. Choice. Home. They ate slow, talked about nothing and everything. Rosie carried the conversation with stories about her school project on butterflies and how she wanted to design dresses that looked like wings. After dessert, Grant poured tea while Rosie arranged her crayons on the floor nearby. Elena cleared plates, letting the sound of clinking china fill the space like music. When she returned to the table, Grant was already watching her. "You don't have to clean up," he said. "I know," she said softly. "But it's how I think." He smiled. Then I won't stop you. She sat, folded her hands. I've been thinking a lot. I figured. You're giving me more than a job. I hoped you'd notice. And I'm not just here to decorate your life with music. His brow furrowed slightly. Of course not. She looked down at her hands. Then I need to ask you something. He set his cup down. Ask. If Natalie comes back, and she wants Rosie, are you prepared for that? His jaw tightened. We'll fight it. And if fighting it means court, means headlines, means dragging our names through another storm? He was quiet, but not unsure. Yes, she exhaled, long and slow. And if I'm not ready to... Elena, he interrupted gently. You don't have to promise me anything right now, but I want you to know I'm not doing any of this because I need saving, or because I think you do. She looked up, eyes glassy. I'm doing it, he said, because the first time I heard your voice, something in me shifted. And every day since, that shift has turned into something I don't want to lose. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. She reached across the table, and he took her hand without hesitation. Rosie, still in the living room, called out suddenly, Are you two getting married yet? Eleanor choked on a laugh. Grant blinked, then smiled like he'd just been dared by the universe itself. Depends who's asking, he called back. I am, Rosie yelled, as if it were the most obvious answer in the world. Then I guess we have to think about it, he said softly to Eleanor. Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't let go of his hand. Later that night, after Rosie had been tucked in with 3 songs and a lecture on why glitter didn't belong on ceilings, Elena sat on the edge of her bed, flipping through the legal packet Grant had placed on her nightstand. It wasn't pressure, it was preparation. Inside were guardianship forms, legal aid contact cards, notes from a family law consultant Grant had spoken to that morning. It felt real, not romantic, not spontaneous. Real. Mira knocked gently on the doorframe. You okay? Elena nodded. He's serious. I know. And I think I'm terrified. Mira stepped inside, sat beside her. That's how I felt when I first held my daughter's hand after her diagnosis, like the world could crack open at any second. But I still held it. Elena looked at her. You never talk about her. Because it still hurts, Mira said. But tonight, watching you 3 at dinner, I remembered something. What? That I didn't lose everything. Some things, yes, but not the capacity to love again. Elena swallowed hard. Don't waste time being afraid of what's already yours, Mira whispered. Just hold it. Near midnight, Elena walked through the house barefoot, drawn by a melody floating from the parlor. Not a full song, just a string of notes, repeating like a question. She found Grant at the piano, back turned, playing gently. He didn't hear her at first. When he did, he kept playing. I was hoping you'd come, he said without looking up. She stepped closer. Why? Because this house sounds better when you're in it. She sat beside him. The bench was wide enough, but somehow they were still shoulder to shoulder. He lifted his hands. She placed hers on the keys. A soft duet began. Improvised, wordless. Honest. Halfway through, she leaned in and whispered, I'm staying. He stopped playing, turned slowly to her. I mean it, she said. His voice caught. For the job? For everything. He didn't speak. He just touched his forehead to hers. And in that still, wordless space, the music answered for both of them. It was no longer just his house. It was theirs. And tomorrow, they'd start the fight to keep it that way. The first public event at Whitmore House arrived like summer thunder, soft at first, then suddenly loud. The main foyer, usually silent and cold, now buzzed with voices and the sound of distant piano notes drifting from the west wing. Eleanor stood just outside the double doors, clutching her tablet, watching guests drift in from the garden. Some came for the architecture, some came for the music. But a few, she knew, came for the whispers, because the house wasn't just beautiful anymore. It was a headline. It was curiosity wrapped in charm. "Elena," Mira said, approaching from the hallway, "you need to breathe." "I am breathing. Shallow doesn't count." Elena laughed nervously and adjusted the lanyard badge around her neck. "How does it look out there?" "Elegant, graceful, and exactly like someone with a clear vision designed it." "I'm still waiting for someone to call me a fraud." Mira raised an eyebrow. "Then let them. But they'll be wrong." Elena nodded, then peeked through the glass. The exhibit looked exactly as she'd imagined. Photographs of Savannah's lost architecture paired with restored pieces from the estate, an old ledger from the original builder, and on a pedestal near the piano, her sheet music printed and framed. Songs for a house that listens. She hadn't signed it, but people still stopped to stare. "Where's Grant?" she asked quietly. "Upstairs," Mira said. "He said he'd be down when it mattered." Elena turned. "It matters now." "I think," Mira said, tilting her head, "he meant when you needed him." Grant stood at the top of the staircase, watching the light from the chandeliers flicker over the crowd. His heart beat faster than he expected, not from fear, from presence. From being here, awake, for the first time in years, with people, with purpose, with her. He scanned the room, found her near the piano. Her hair pulled back, her dress simple, and her hands moving gently as she guided someone through the gallery, explaining details he himself had forgotten. And then, like gravity, her eyes found his. She smiled, and he began to descend the stairs. Shut. By 8:30, the event had settled into a soft rhythm. The house had taken on a pulse again. Conversation. Music. Laughter that didn't echo but landed softly in the high ceilings. Elena stood by the refreshment table when Evan appeared at her side. "You really did it," he said. She turned, surprised. "You're here. You invited me. I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't think I would either," he admitted. "But curiosity is hard to kill." She smiled faintly. "So is a rumor." Evan's eyes softened. "You look happy." "I'm working on it." He pulled something from his pocket. A folded slip of paper. "I also brought this." She hesitated. "What is it?" "I followed up on Natalie." The words dropped into her stomach like cold stones. "She's in Macon now," he continued quieter. "A halfway house. 6 months clean. And she's been asking about Rosie." Elena's fingers curled tightly around the edge of the table. "I didn't tell her anything," Evan added quickly. "But she's trying to find you." Eleanor looked away, blinking hard. "I thought I'd have more time." "You still do, but not forever." "Why are you helping me?" He shrugged. "You were always the one who saw people clearly." "Even me." "I figured it was time I returned the favor." She took the slip from his hand, folded it again without reading. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm around," he said gently. If you need anything, even just a neutral voice. She nodded. And then Evan disappeared back into the crowd. Later, as the guests began to drift out, and the house quieted again, Grant found her in the parlor, standing alone in front of the piano. "You didn't tell me he was coming," he said. "I wasn't sure he would. You okay?" She turned, looked up at him. "Natalie's looking for Rosie." He didn't react with panic or surprise, just quiet understanding. "What does she want?" he asked. "I don't know yet." Grant stepped closer. "What do you want?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "To protect Rosie, to keep what we've built, to not have it all ripped away by someone who walked out when we needed her most." Grant didn't say anything at first. He just reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 pieces of paper. "What's this?" she asked. "I spoke to a family attorney," he said. "These are initial guardianship documents. If we file together, if we show the court Rosie has stability, education, a home, then it makes any claim Natalie might bring a lot harder to push through." Eleanor stared at the papers. "This is real," she whispered. "It always has been," he replied. "But now it's protected." She stepped closer, eyes wet. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. Even if it means headlines. Even if it means hearings. Even if it means sitting in a courtroom with you, holding your hand, while we fight for the life we've built." Elena looked at him, and for the first time since Natalie's name resurfaced, she felt anchored. Safe. She nodded. "Okay." He reached for her hand. "We'll do this together." She looked at him, this man who once buried himself in silence, and whispered, "I love you, Grant." He didn't hesitate. "I love you, Elena." Outside, the lights of the house dimmed, but inside, something had just begun to shine. Savannah's humidity lingered like breath against the glass, the morning fog still pressed low across the estate gardens as the house stirred. Grant stood at the front window, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the mist roll past the iron gate. He wasn't sure why he felt the weight today. Maybe it was the echo of Elena's words from last night, or maybe it was the silence before something big finally broke open. He heard her before he saw her. Bare feet, light steps, the soft shift of her sweater against the wood floor. "You didn't sleep," Elena said gently. He didn't turn. Too many thoughts. Not enough quiet. She came beside him, her shoulder brushing his arm. "That's new for you." He smiled faintly. "You've rearranged everything." Her eyes moved over his face. "I didn't mean to. I'm not complaining." They stood there in silence for a long minute. The kind of silence that felt full, not empty. Elena tucked her hair behind her ear. "The lawyer called this morning. Natalie's officially filed for contact." Grant turned fully now, jaw tightening. "Already?" She must have gotten wind of the exhibit. The press. Rosie's name never got out, but maybe she saw the photo. Maybe she just knew. What does she want? Elena swallowed. To meet. Grant crossed his arms, grounding himself. You don't have to agree. She's her mother, Grant. I can't erase that. And I don't want Rosie to grow up wondering why I kept her in the dark. You're not keeping her in the dark. You're keeping her safe. I know. But I also know what it's like to wonder why someone walked away and never get the answer. Her voice wavered at the end, and Grant reached for her hand. Then we do it on your terms. She nodded, staring out at the trees. I want the meeting here, controlled, comfortable. Not some cold office. I'll make it happen. And I want you there. You don't have to ask. 3 days later, the sky turned grey in the early afternoon. Elena paced the front corridor, while Mira arranged a tray of coffee and tea, her movements crisp, rehearsed, like she needed to keep busy to stay calm. Rosie was with Luce, spending the day at the botanical gardens, blissfully unaware. Eleanor stood by the front door, arms crossed tightly. What if she's changed? What if she hasn't? You don't owe her anything, Mira said. But Rosie deserves truth, and so do you. The sound of tires crunching on gravel snapped them both to attention. Grant appeared beside Elena. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The black sedan rolled to a stop. The door opened. Natalie stepped out. She looked thinner, not broken, not frail, but like someone who'd weathered too much too fast. Her hair was tied back, her clothes simple. She held nothing in her hands but the strap of her purse. She paused at the base of the steps, like she wasn't sure if her legs would carry her all the way. Elena opened the door before Natalie could knock. They stared at each other for a long beat. "Hi," Natalie said, her voice small but steady. "Come in," Elena replied. They moved into the sitting room. Natalie looked around, clearly taking in every corner, every expensive surface. Her eyes lingered on a framed drawing Rosie had done, 3 stick figures and a bright yellow house. "She drew that," Elena said. "I know." Natalie smiled faintly. "She always liked yellow." "She still does." Grant brought the tea tray, set it down, and took a seat beside Elena. Natalie sat across from them, perching on the edge of the couch, like she was afraid to disturb anything. "I didn't come to cause trouble," she began. I needed to see her. I needed to see what kind of life she has." "You left," Elena said quietly. "You left her with no note, no call, no explanation." "I was drowning," Natalie replied. "Every time I looked at her, I saw everything I couldn't be, everything I was failing at. And now I'm trying. I've been clean. I have a job, a place to live. But I'm not here to take her. I swear. I just need to know she's okay. That you're not resenting me every time you hold her hand." Elena's throat ached. "I don't resent you. I just don't know if I can trust you." "That's fair." They sat in that fragile stillness, tension held between them like a thin glass thread. Grant finally spoke. "We've started the process to get legal guardianship. Rosie doesn't know yet." "We've waited for the right time," Natalie nodded. "I figured." "She loves you," Elena said. "She doesn't remember what you did." "She remembers your singing, the way you used to braid her hair. That's all she knows." Tears welled in Natalie's eyes. "I want her to keep that version of me. I want her to believe in that version, even if I wasn't strong enough to be her then." Elena stood, walked slowly to the fireplace, then turned back. "If I let you see her, it's going to be slow. Controlled. Visits only when she asks. No surprises. No promises you can't keep. I understand. And if you slip, if you disappear again, it ends. Not because I want to punish you, but because she deserves better." Natalie nodded, wiping her eyes. "She already has better." "She has you." Elena blinked, overwhelmed. "I'll go now," Natalie said, rising. "I don't want to confuse her today. I just needed to see where she laughs." She walked to the door. Just before she stepped outside, she turned back. "She still sings when she's nervous," she said. That's how I know she's still got a part of me." Elena didn't answer, because the truth hurt too much to say out loud. When the door closed, Grant pulled her into his arms. "You did the right thing," he whispered. "I don't know if it was enough. It was enough for today." She clung to him, letting herself fall into the only thing that hadn't broken beneath her weight. And across the house, the piano waited, lid open, ready for whatever song came next. The sun was beginning to set, casting long slants of amber light through the tall windows of Whitmore House. The parlor was empty but warm, the kind of quiet that whispered rather than hushed. Eleanor sat at the piano, fingers resting gently on the keys, not playing, just listening to the stillness. She hadn't told Rosie about Natalie yet. How do you explain to a child that the person who once sang them lullabies now stands on the other side of their carefully rebuilt world? Her eyes drifted toward the hallway where Rosie had just disappeared, skipping toward the kitchen, asking Mira for another scoop of vanilla ice cream. She had no idea what was unfolding around her, and for now, Eleanor was grateful. Behind her, Grant entered quietly, a folder tucked under his arm. His steps were slow, deliberate, like he didn't want to startle anything, especially her. "She's upstairs with Mira," he said. Eleanor nodded. "She asked if we were going to a movie tonight." "And what did you say?" "I said maybe." He placed the folder on the bench beside her, then sat, keeping just enough distance to show he wouldn't press. Not unless she asked him to. "She's happy," Elena said softly. "Safe. She sleeps through the night. She eats better. She's learning songs again. And Natalie's name still tastes like doubt in my mouth." Grant rested his elbows on his knees. "You don't have to decide anything tonight." "But I do, because time doesn't wait for my comfort." She looked down. "Natalie might ask for visitation officially. I know it, and we haven't finished the guardianship paperwork. If she pushes first, she won't win," he said. "You can't know that." He looked at her. "Then we fight harder." She blinked and her voice cracked. "What if she tells Rosie she never wanted to leave? What if Rosie starts to believe the years between didn't matter? They mattered to you. But I'm not her mother, Grant. You're everything she calls home." Her hand curled into a fist over the keys. "And what if I'm not enough?" He turned fully to face her, voice steady. "You are." They sat in silence, the tension so thick it felt like another person in the room. Then Grant opened the folder and handed her a sheet. "What's this?" "It's a letter," he said. "From the foundation." She scanned it quickly. "They want to fund a permanent program here." Her voice lifted in disbelief. "Concerts, educational tours, children's music outreach?" "They want you to lead it," Grant said. "You started something they can't ignore." "I didn't mean to start anything." "But you did," he said. "You gave this house a new reason to exist. And if we do this, if we finish the guardianship, if we formalize everything, you can give Rosie a life built on music, not on memory." Elena's hand went to her chest, like she was steadying something inside her. "This all feels so big. It's supposed to." She stood abruptly and walked toward the fireplace, her back to him. "Every time I think we've stepped into something beautiful, something real, it's like the past knocks harder. It's not just Natalie. It's who I used to be, what I let happen, what I accepted for so long because I thought I didn't deserve more." "You do," he said quietly. "I know that now, but I didn't before." Grant walked up behind her. He didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel his presence without the weight of pressure. "You said something once," she whispered. "You said I rearranged everything. He nodded. You did. Well, you taught me what a house sounds like when it heals. He finally reached for her hand. Then let's keep building. She turned to him, her voice low. We sign everything tomorrow. He nodded. First thing. And if the board pushes back, I'm ready. She stared at him for a long moment, something flickering behind her eyes. I believe you. He leaned in then, and she met him halfway, not rushed, not dramatic. Just a kiss that landed in the middle of all the fear, all the uncertainty, and still made room for hope. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. We're really doing this. We are. A sound from the hall made them turn. Rosie appeared in the doorway, holding a drawing in one hand and a spoon in the other. Can I play piano before bed? Grant glanced at Elena. Eleanor smiled. Of course, baby. Just one song. Rosie ran to the bench, climbed up, and laid her drawing on the keys. It was a picture of the three of them again, this time with a dog, a picnic basket, and what looked like music notes floating above their heads. I added music this time, Rosie said, because our house sings now. Elena knelt beside her, her voice shaking slightly. That's beautiful, Rosie. Rosie beamed. It's our forever song. Grant leaned against the doorway, watching them, and as Rosie began plinking out a simple tune, nothing fancy, just a rhythm she'd made up, the whole house seemed to fall into sync. Not loud, not perfect, but undeniably alive. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't return. It rained the morning of the hearing. Not a dramatic storm, just a slow, steady drizzle that clung to the windows of the courthouse and softened everything in sight. Savannah looked blurred, like a painting that had been touched before the paint dried. Eleanor stood outside courtroom 3B with Grant beside her, both of them dressed simply, but with intention. She wore navy. He wore charcoal, neutral, grounded. Serious. But the color in their clothes couldn't hide the anxiety in their eyes. She clenched the edges of her coat sleeves, heart racing with a rhythm that no melody could settle. Grant reached over and touched her hand. Still want to do this? Yes, she whispered. I'm just afraid of what I won't see coming. You've already faced more than most ever will. I'm not worried about me. He understood. Inside that room, behind those polished wooden doors, the shape of Rosie's life was about to shift. Forever. A clerk appeared, pushing the door open. You're on deck. Eleanor and Grant stepped inside, their footsteps muffled against the carpet. The room smelled faintly of paper, wood, and old tension. The judge hadn't arrived yet. On the far bench sat Natalie, hands folded tightly in her lap, shoulders drawn in. She looked different, cleaner, composed. But the expression on her face was impossible to read. She didn't smile when she saw Eleanor. Eleanor didn't smile either. They were past that. They were here for truth. The bailiff called everyone to rise as the judge entered. Her voice was steady, firm, professional without being cold. Once seated, the hearing began. Elena didn't remember the first 5 minutes clearly. Her heart pounded too loud. Names were read. Case numbers noted, and then they were sworn in. Natalie was called first. She stood, walked slowly to the stand. State your name for the record. Natalie Rivera. How long have you been clean? 9.5 months. And during that time, have you maintained employment? Yes, I work at a bookstore in Macon. Part-time, but stable. Have you had any contact with the minor in question during that time? No, Natalie's voice caught, then steadied. I didn't think I should until I had something to offer. Do you feel ready now? I feel more prepared than I ever was before. I'm not asking for custody. I'm asking for connection. That answer tightened something in Elena's chest. She expected a fight. She didn't expect a request for space. Then it was Elena's turn. She stood at the stand, spine tall, voice calm, but laced with something fragile underneath. I didn't plan to raise Rosie, she began. But when Natalie left, I had no choice. And I've never once regretted staying. Do you believe her biological mother poses a risk? Elena hesitated. I believe she poses uncertainty, and Rosie has had enough of that. Do you believe Natalie is trying to take your place? No. I think she's trying to remember how to exist in her child's world. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you. When she returned to her seat, Grant took her hand. She didn't pull away. The judge reviewed the petition for guardianship, the documents, the statements, the letters from teachers, neighbors, even Mira, all painting a picture not of a perfect home, but a devoted one, a consistent one, a real one. Then came the part that made Elena's hands tremble. The judge looked up. Is the minor present? The door opened. Rosie walked in, holding Mira's hand. Her dress was yellow, the one she said made her look like sunshine. Her hair was in 2 braids. She looked around, eyes wide but not scared. The judge smiled gently. Hello, Rosie. Hi, Rosie said, soft but clear. Do you know why you're here today? Rosie nodded. Because you want to know who takes care of me. And who does. Rosie didn't hesitate. My Aunt Elena and Mr. Grant. And how do they take care of you? They listen when I sing, and when I'm scared. And they make waffles on Sunday, and they don't leave. That last line broke something in the air. Even Natalie looked down. The judge leaned forward. And would you like to keep living with them? Rosie nodded. It's my home now. No one breathed. The judge sat back. I've heard enough. Her voice was calm, but final. In the matter of legal guardianship of minor Rosie Rivera, the court rules in favor of Eleanor Rivera and Grant Whitmore. Full guardianship is granted. Visitation between the biological mother and minor is to be supervised and contingent upon the continued progress of rehabilitation and mutual agreement of the parties involved. Elena's breath left her in a rush. It was done. It was real. Rosie turned in her seat and beamed. Does this mean I get a key to the house now? The courtroom laughed softly. Eleanor smiled, eyes wet, heart full. Outside, as they stepped into the rain, Rosie danced ahead with her arms wide. Grant reached for Eleanor's hand. She took it, and they walked together, not back to a temporary life, but into something built to last. Forever wasn't promised. But it was finally possible. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Settled, not suspended. Whitmore House no longer carried the weight of secrets in its walls. It carried voices, laughter, the steady rhythm of life reclaiming space. 2 days after the hearing, Eleanor sat alone on the back porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a notebook open on her lap. The air was crisp for a savannah evening, a gentle breeze curling through the garden like a whisper. The porch light cast a soft glow across the wooden planks, and the scent of lemon balm drifted from the herb pots beside her. She traced her pen slowly over the paper. Notes, lyrics, thoughts that had no place yet but demanded to be written anyway. Inside, Grant was helping Rosie build a cardboard castle in the living room. Scissors, markers, an entire roll of tape sacrificed in the name of imagination. Every few minutes, Elena could hear Rosie's voice rise in excitement, Grant's deep chuckle trailing behind. It was the kind of sound that didn't ask for attention, but planted itself in her chest anyway. She hadn't told him yet about the envelope, not because she wanted to hide it, because she didn't know what to do with it. She reached down beside her and opened her bag, pulled it out slowly. Evan had dropped it off that morning without a word. Just a nod, and the quiet kind of expression that said, "You should read this when you're ready." She unfolded the single-page letter. "Elena, I know you think I came back to take her. I didn't. I came because I was afraid you'd done a better job loving her than I ever could, and I needed to see it for myself. You did, and somehow that didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It made me breathe again. Tell Rosie I'm proud of her, and that if she ever wants to know who I used to be, I'll be waiting to tell her the truth. Not the clean version, but the real one. Take care of her. Keep singing." Natalie. Elena folded the letter slowly, pressing the edges down with trembling fingers. It wasn't permission, but it felt like peace. She looked up as the screen door creaked open behind her. Grant stepped out, rubbing a smear of blue marker from his arm. "The Queen has declared bedtime irrelevant." Elena smiled. "Long live the cardboard crown." He sat beside her, close enough to share her blanket. He glanced down at the folded paper in her hand. "Is that what Evan brought?" She nodded. "You read it?" "Yes." "Do I want to know?" "You should." She passed it to him. He unfolded it, read silently, his face still. When he finished, he looked out over the yard, the moonlight just beginning to spill across the lawn. "She's letting go," he said quietly. "Or learning how." Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder. "I don't hate her anymore." "That's a big thing to say." "I don't think I hated her to begin with. I think I hated the empty place she left behind." Grant didn't speak, but his arm came around her gently, anchoring her. "She said something," Elena continued, "that I'd done a better job loving Rosie. You have. But I wasn't always sure I could." He pulled back enough to look at her. "Elena, you didn't just love Rosie, you gave her back her voice." Elena's eyes glistened. "I thought I'd lost mine for a long time." "You didn't." She looked at him, really looked. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd never sung that first morning?" He smiled. "Then I'd still be drinking cold coffee in a house full of ghosts." She laughed softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "And I'd still be folding towels at dawn, pretending not to dream." He leaned in, brushing his forehead against hers. "You saved me." "No," she whispered. "We saved each other." A pause, then a sound from inside. Rosie calling them. Her voice, sleepy and sweet, drifted out into the garden. "Auntie, can I show you the flags I made for my castle?" Elena stood, folded the blanket around her arm. "I'm coming, baby." Grant stood too, reaching for her hand. "You know, she asked me earlier if she'd always live here." "What did you tell her?" "I told her she already does." As they stepped inside, the warmth of the house greeted them. Soft light, scattered art supplies, the smell of cinnamon from Mira's tea still lingering in the air. Rosie stood in the middle of the room, holding 2 pieces of colored paper taped to pencils. "One is for you," she said to Grant. "And one is for Auntie." "What are they for?" Elena asked. "They're flags for our kingdom," Rosie said proudly. "The music castle." Elena looked at the flag in her hand. Crayon hearts, a stick figure with a braid, a piano drawn with crooked keys. She knelt down and hugged her. "It's perfect." Rosie yawned into her shoulder. We're all the rulers now. Eleanor glanced up at Grant, who nodded, a quiet smile spreading across his face. Yeah, Eleanor whispered. We are. The mornings had begun to change, not just in the weather, though summer's heat had softened into something quieter, but in the way the house breathed. Whitmore House no longer felt haunted. It felt lived in, worn. Warm, like music left on a low volume in the next room. Elena moved through the kitchen, barefoot and humming, folding Rosie's lunch napkin into a clumsy heart. The routine had become comfort, a kind of rhythm no one spoke aloud, but everyone moved to. She glanced at the clock, 7:18. Rosie would come bounding in any second, shoes on the wrong feet, holding 3 mismatched barrettes in one hand and asking which matched her musical mood. Grant entered before Rosie did, still tying his tie, jacket slung over one shoulder. I can't find the second page of my speech, he said. Did you check the piano bench? He paused, gave her a look. Why would it be in the piano bench? Because that's where Rosie was last night, pretending to be your assistant. Grant blinked, exhaled. Of course, Eleanor smiled, handing him a mug. Strong, no sugar. You're welcome. He took it, brushing a kiss over her cheek without needing to ask. You're a miracle. She raised a brow. Tell the board that when they start pushing about the program budget. That's today? No, she said, pulling out a file. That's tomorrow. Today, you're charming the local preservation society and pretending you don't hate catered quiche. He groaned softly, took a long sip of coffee, and leaned against the counter. And tonight? She didn't answer right away. Because tonight, they'd invited Natalie for her first supervised visit. Not at the house. Not yet. Neutral ground, a public garden, 1 hour. Elena had barely slept. She turned to him. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Grant studied her, his gaze steady. You're doing the brave thing. I'm scared it'll undo all the good. It won't. And if it does, then we hold the pieces together until they stop shaking. Before she could reply, Rosie burst into the kitchen in a blur of energy. The blue beret won. It said it wants to go on an adventure. Elena laughed, kneeling to fix the lopsided clip. Then we better pack it a snack. The garden was quiet when they arrived later that evening. Golden light draped over the hedges, the kind of light that made the edges of things feel softer than they really were. Elena stood beside the stone bench under the sycamore tree, glancing down the path again and again, her heart in her throat. Mira stood a few steps behind with Rosie, giving them space but watching closely. Grant wasn't there, by choice. He said this moment needed to be hers, not his. He'd be waiting at the cafe around the corner, coffee in hand, ready to step in if needed. Rosie held a small bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked earlier that afternoon. Do you think she'll like these? She asked. Elena crouched beside her. I think they're beautiful, and that's enough. Rosie bit her lip. I'm kind of nervous. I am too. Do we have to call her Mom? Elena's heart twisted. No, she said gently. You can call her whatever feels right. Rosie nodded, gripping the flowers tighter. And then Natalie appeared. She wore a pale blue blouse, hair down, no makeup. Just her. She walked slowly, cautiously, like someone afraid the ground might disappear beneath her feet if she stepped too hard. Elena straightened, every part of her tense. Natalie stopped a few feet away, her eyes fixed on Rosie. Hi, she said. Rosie didn't answer right away. Elena touched her shoulder. Rosie stepped forward. "These are for you." Natalie blinked rapidly as she accepted the flowers. "They're beautiful." "Thank you." A long silence stretched between them. Then Rosie tilted her head. "Do you like gardens?" Natalie nodded. "I do." "Then come on. I'll show you the turtle pond." She took Natalie's hand. And just like that, they walked down the path together, the smallest thread of something fragile trailing behind them. Elena stood still, watching them, barely breathing. Mira stepped beside her. "She's okay," she said softly. Elena didn't answer, because she wasn't sure if this was healing or heartbreak disguised as hope. An hour later, Rosie returned running, cheeks flushed. "She said I have her nose," she said. "Do you think that's true?" Elena smiled. "Maybe a little." "She gave me a necklace. Just a tiny one, with a music note on it." Eleanor's chest ached. "She asked if she could see me again," Rosie said. "I said maybe." Maybe is a good word. Rosie leaned into her side. "I still like our house better." Eleanor kissed her forehead. "Me too." Later that night, after Rosie had fallen asleep with the necklace clutched in her hand, Elena sat on the edge of the bed, watching her. Grant entered quietly. "She was brave," he said. "She was. You were too." Elena turned, eyes shining. "I didn't feel brave." "You didn't run. That's braver than most." She stood, crossed the room, and leaned into his arms. "She's going to want to know more," she whispered. "About Natalie. About everything. Then we tell her, one honest layer at a time." Eleanor nodded. "I just don't want her to grow up thinking love leaves. Then show her the kind that stays." He kissed her temple. They stood in silence. And in the other room, the piano remained open, untouched for now, but ready, always, to carry the next song when the moment came. The wedding was never going to be grand, not in the way people expected from someone like Grant Whitmore. There were no gold-trimmed invitations, no guest list measured in hundreds, no ballroom glittering with chandeliers. Instead, it would be quiet, intentional, held in the same garden where they'd first dared to imagine a different kind of life. The one with sunlight and soft music and Sunday mornings that didn't feel like ghosts. It was Mira who insisted they at least have a proper altar. So she and Rosie spent the morning before the ceremony weaving flowers through the arch Grant had built himself. Hands dusty with sawdust and pollen, his sleeves rolled, his brow furrowed like he was sketching a future in wood. Elena watched from the porch, barefoot in jeans and a threadbare t-shirt, hair pinned up loosely as the breeze whispered promises across her skin. It wasn't nerves she felt, it was weight. A good weight, the kind you lean into. Luce came up behind her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Still time to run, mija," she said with a wink. Elena laughed. "I've done enough running." "You've done enough surviving," Luce corrected. "Now you live." Inside, her dress hung waiting, simple, ivory, soft as memory. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Just honest. By late afternoon, the garden had transformed. Strings of warm lights hung between the trees. The scent of rosemary and lemon from the nearby bushes perfumed the air. Chairs were placed in imperfect rows, some occupied by friends from the Preservation Society, a few neighbors, and even a couple of Grant's oldest project partners who'd flown in quietly without pretense. Evan stood off to the side, notepad tucked away, camera off. He wasn't there to report, just to witness. And in the center of it all stood Rosie, tiara firmly in place, holding a satin pillow with 2 gold rings nestled inside like treasure. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked Grant as he straightened his collar. He crouched beside her. "More ready than I've ever been for anything." She narrowed her eyes. "Even building that giant museum?" He smiled. "Especially that." The music started softly, Mira at the piano, playing a melody Elena had written in secret. She called it Home Again, and as her fingers moved across the keys, the whole garden seemed to take a breath. Then Elena stepped into view. Grant turned before anyone else, and the look on his face was nothing less than reverence. She moved slowly, every step like a note in a familiar song. Her dress caught the breeze, and the smile on her face, small, sure, glowing, hit him harder than any architecture ever could. She didn't look like someone being rescued. She looked like someone who had chosen this moment. This man, this life. Rosie stood between them as the officiant spoke, her hands steady as she offered up the rings. Grant took Elena's hand, then paused, eyes searching hers. "I used to think love had to be big," he said quietly, loud enough for only her to hear. Loud. A declaration that echoed. Elena's fingers tightened around his. "But then you walked into my house," he continued, "and sang to an empty room like it was a cathedral. And that's when I learned, love doesn't need to shout." She blinked back tears. "It just needs to stay," he nodded. "And I'm staying, wherever you are." The officiant guided them through the vows, but the real ones had already been spoken. Not just now, but in every quiet dinner, every morning coffee, every story read to Rosie by lamplight, every hard conversation that ended in softness. When the rings were slipped on, applause broke out. Small, intimate, full of knowing. Grant kissed her, with the care of a man who'd rebuilt his life, brick by brick, and finally placed the last one. Elena kissed him like she knew what it meant to be heard, finally, completely. Rosie squealed. "We're officially a kingdom now." Laughter bubbled through the crowd. Later, as twilight settled, guests lingered over plates of peach cobbler and glasses of sparkling cider. Music drifted from the parlor, and for the first time Grant and Eleanor danced under the open sky, their rhythm unhurried, their steps unpracticed but right. Evan approached her with a soft smile. "Can I finally write the story now?" She shook her head. "Not yet. Still afraid of the world seeing it?" "No," she said, glancing toward Grant and Rosie. "Just want to hold it a little longer before I let it go." He nodded, then walked away. As the evening wound down, and the last guests faded into the night, Grant and Elena stood at the piano again. She rested her hand on the lid. "Play something," he said. "You." She raised a brow. "What?" "Write something, for us, for Rosie. Something that says everything we didn't know how to say until now." Eleanor sat and played. No lyrics. No big crescendo. Just a melody that sounded like sunlight on wooden floors, laughter in a quiet room, and a child humming in her sleep. Rosie curled on the couch, the tiara slipping off her head, and whispered as she drifted, "This house is magic." Elena looked at Grant. He whispered, "It always was." And this time the music didn't end. Autumn arrived softly that year. Savannah's heat gave way to wind that curled through the trees with a gentle whisper, brushing dry leaves across the lawn like forgotten pages. The house adjusted to the change, like it had been waiting for this season all along. Warm light glowed through the windows, rooms dressed in golden tones and quiet purpose. Elena sat in the solarium, sketching notes on sheet music with a pencil she chewed absent-mindedly. Her hair was tucked into a loose bun, one foot curled under her as she glanced occasionally toward the garden. Rosie was out there somewhere, building her version of a music museum with Mira, complete with cardboard exhibits and string lights borrowed from last year's Christmas box. She heard footsteps before she saw him. Grant stepped in with his usual quiet presence, holding 2 mugs. He set one down beside her, then stood in front of the window, watching the wind pull at the edges of Rosie's blanket fort. "Elena," he said after a moment, "I've been thinking." "That's either a good thing or something's broken," she teased. "Not broken," he smiled. "More like reframed." She set her pencil down. "Tell me." He turned, hands in his pockets. "I got a call from the Historical Society. They want to nominate Whitmore House as a landmark, fully preserved." "Fully public." Her eyes widened. "That's huge." "It is, but it comes with conditions. Tours, access restrictions." She waited. "And I told them no." Eleanor's brows knit. "You did?" "I told them this house already serves a purpose. It's not a museum. It's a home, a sanctuary, a place where something real started. I won't let it be picked apart by people who only want to look, not listen." She stood, walked over to him. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He paused, then reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. It was a drawing, Rosie's, of course, a new one. This time, it wasn't the house or them in front of it. It was the piano, and above it, scrawled in childlike handwriting, "Some houses sing back." Elena stared at it, heart catching in her throat. "She gets it," Grant said quietly. "She feels it. She always did." They stood in the silence of that moment, the kind that didn't need filling. It just needed to be held. "I've been working on something," Eleanor said, reaching for the folder on the table. "A new piece, for Rosie." He watched her as she opened the pages, lined with notes, tempo changes, chords that swelled and fell like breath. "It's not done yet," she admitted, "but it's the first thing I've written where I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted to tell the truth." "Play it for me." "Now?" "Now." She led him to the piano. He sat beside her as she placed her fingers on the keys, drawing out a slow, deliberate melody. It started small. One hand, a single progression, and then expanded, wrapping around itself like a memory. No lyrics. Just music. He closed his eyes as it filled the space. The kind of song you don't hum afterward because you don't want to break its spell. When she finished, neither of them moved. Then Grant whispered, "That sounded like her." "I know." Outside, the back door creaked open. Rosie burst in, cheeks flushed, hair windblown, dragging Mira behind her. "We finished the museum," she shouted, "and there's a guest book." Elena laughed. "How many guests so far?" 3 squirrels, 2 bees, and Aunt Mira." "Well, it's more visitors than most galleries." Rosie ran to the piano and climbed onto the bench between them. "Did you play my song?" "I did," Elena said. "But it sounds better with you in the room." Rosie beamed, pressing one key with her finger. "This house is magic." "You keep saying that," Grant said with a smile. "Why?" Rosie shrugged. "Because we don't cry alone anymore." Elena's chest tightened. Mira, standing in the doorway, nodded. "Out of the mouths of babes." As the day faded into dusk, the house filled slowly with laughter, footsteps, The clatter of dinner being prepared. Mira's voice called out for someone to taste the soup. Rosie hummed under her breath while drawing on the kitchen floor. Eleanor stood at the window, hands wrapped around a mug, and watched Grant light the candles on the porch table like he always did. Slowly, carefully, one by one. The world outside kept turning, but inside these walls, something had finally settled. Not into perfection, but into peace. She stepped onto the porch, joining him. "You know," she said, "there's a lesson in all this." Grant turned to her, candlelight flickering in his eyes. "Yeah? What's broken can become beautiful, if we let it, if we listen." He pulled her into his arms. And behind them, through the open window, the piano sat waiting. Not silent, not forgotten. Just resting between songs. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way.